Dollar Tree looks simple on the surface, every shelf priced the same. Nothing complicated about how to shop it. But talk to staff who've worked there for years, and a different picture starts to show up. One full of small, quiet details that most shoppers never notice, and that can genuinely change how much you spend, especially if you're shopping on a fixed income. We asked around, compared notes across several locations, and pulled together 12 of these details specifically worth knowing heading into the rest of 2026. None of these require a membership, an app download, or any special status. Just knowing they exist is enough to start using them. None of these are dramatic, headline-grabbing secrets. They're small, practical habits that quietly add up over a year of regular shopping, which is exactly the kind of savings that's easy to overlook precisely because no single one looks impressive on its own. None of them require special access, a subscription, or any kind of insider status. Every single one is available to any shopper willing to ask a question, check a tag, or adjust the timing of a trip slightly. What makes these worth compiling together is that most shoppers only ever stumble onto one or two of these by accident over years of regular visits, rather than knowing the full list up front the way we're laying it out here today. Let's get into it. Secret number 1. Prices aren't all $1.25 anymore, and the tag matters more than ever. Dollar Tree expanded its price points a few years back, and today the shelves genuinely mix $1.25 items with $3, $5, and even higher-priced items in the same aisle. Staff say the biggest mistake they see regularly is a shopper assuming everything on a shelf is the base price without actually checking the small printed tag underneath. A quick habit of glancing at every tag before adding something to a cart prevents an unpleasant surprise at checkout. This matters most in categories like seasonal decor, small appliances, and party supplies, where higher price points tend to cluster more than in basics, like cleaning supplies or snacks. Basics like cleaning products, canned food, and everyday paper goods have stayed closest to the original single price point, according to staff, which is part of why the price creep in other categories catches longtime shoppers off guard. One employee mentioned that confusion over pricing is one of the most common questions at the register, especially from shoppers who remember when everything really was a single price throughout the whole store. For anyone shopping on a fixed monthly budget, this small habit matters more than it might seem, since a handful of higher-priced items mixed unknowingly into a cart can throw off careful monthly planning. One regular shopper mentioned keeping a small mental note of which categories tend to run higher, checking those specific tags more carefully while moving quickly through familiar, reliably dollar-priced aisles. Bottom line, a few extra seconds of attention at the shelf prevents a surprise at the register, and it's one of the easiest habits on this entire list to start using on the very next trip. Staff mentioned this becomes second nature within just a couple of shopping trips, to the point where most regulars barely think about it consciously anymore. For anyone managing a strict monthly budget, this habit alone can prevent the kind of small, repeated overspending that adds up unnoticed across a full year of shopping trips. It's a habit worth mentioning to a family member, helping with a budget as well, since it's such a simple thing to overlook. Accurate number 2. New shipments tend to arrive on a predictable weekly schedule. Most locations receive truck deliveries on the same 1 or 2 days each week, according to staff, and the freshest, most complete stock of new arrivals shows up shortly after. Shopping right after a delivery day means better selection and less picked over shelves, particularly for anything trending or limited in quantity. Staff mentioned that simply asking a cashier or stock associate which day trucks typically arrive is usually enough to get a straight answer, since it isn't treated as confidential information, just something most customers never think to ask. For anyone specifically hunting for practical senior-focused finds, which tend to move quickly once word spreads, timing a trip around delivery day can be the difference between finding several good options or arriving to picked-over shelves. One shopper mentioned adjusting her whole weekly routine slightly, simply because knowing the delivery schedule made such a noticeable difference in what she found each visit. Bottom line, knowing a simple delivery schedule, freely available just by asking, can meaningfully improve the odds of finding exactly what you're looking for on any given trip. Staff noted that even calling ahead to ask about delivery timing is something most locations are happy to answer over the phone. This is particularly useful for anyone with limited mobility, where planning a single well-timed trip matters more than being able to make several trips throughout the week. A single well-planned trip on the right day can accomplish what might otherwise take 2 or 3 less successful visits. Accurate number 3. Clearance markdowns happen in stages, not all at once. An item heading toward discontinuation typically gets marked down gradually. Staff explained, rather than dropping straight to its lowest price immediately. Watching a specific item over a few weeks, rather than assuming the first markdown is the final one, can mean catching a steeper discount later if you're not in a rush to buy it right away. A first markdown might only shave off a small percentage, staff noted, with steeper cuts following in later weeks as the remaining stock gets closer to clearing out entirely. Staff mentioned that keeping a mental note of a specific item's first markdown date makes it easier to gauge roughly when the next steeper price cut is likely to follow. This matters most for anyone stocking up on non-urgent items, home goods, seasonal decor, or extras rather than something needed immediately, where waiting even 2 or 3 weeks can mean a noticeably lower price for the exact same item. One regular mentioned tracking a specific discontinued product's price drop over several weeks before finally buying multiples once it hit its lowest point. Bottom line, patience alone, without spending any extra effort, can mean paying meaningfully less for the exact same item later in its markdown cycle. Staff mentioned that the exact markdown percentages can vary by category, with seasonal items sometimes dropping faster than everyday household basics. For anyone not in a hurry, this patience costs nothing and can mean the difference between paying full clearance price or catching the very lowest markdown before an item disappears entirely. It rewards exactly the kind of unhurried, planning ahead shopping style that many regulars already naturally practice. Accurate number 4. The loyalty app unlocks small but real extra savings. Dollar Tree's free rewards app periodically offers digital coupons and small cashback-style perks on specific items, according to staff, stacking on top of the already low sticker price. It costs nothing to download and takes just a minute to set up, and the savings add up over repeated trips. Staff mentioned that a lot of regulars simply aren't aware the app exists at all, assuming a dollar store wouldn't bother with a loyalty program the way a grocery chain might. Staff mentioned that pointing out the app to a hesitant customer at checkout often results in genuine surprise, followed by a quick download right there in the store. This misconception costs regular shoppers real savings over time, simply because the assumption stops them from ever checking whether the app might be worth the minute it takes to install. Staff mentioned encouraging skeptical shoppers to simply try it once and judge for themselves rather than dismissing it outright. For anyone managing a tight monthly budget, these small digital discounts genuinely add up over dozens of trips throughout a year, even if any single trip savings feel minor on their own. One shopper mentioned her adult child helped set up the app during a visit, and she's used it every single trip since without any trouble. Bottom line, a free app that takes a minute to set up and adds real savings to nearly every trip is one of the easiest wins on this entire list. Staff mentioned that new digital coupons tend to rotate weekly, so checking the app before each trip is worth the small extra step. For anyone less comfortable with apps generally, asking a family member to help set it up just once is usually all it takes to start benefiting from it on every future trip. Once set up, it requires almost no ongoing effort beyond a quick scan at checkout. Accurate number 5. Staff can often flag when an item is being discontinued before it's obvious. Employees who work the floor regularly tend to know ahead of most customers when a specific item is being phased out. Staff said, since they're the ones handling the inventory changes directly, simply asking a friendly employee whether something is sticking around can save you from stocking up unnecessarily or alert you to grab extra before it's gone for good. This works best with staff at a store visited regularly, rather than a one-time trip to an unfamiliar location, since a returning face tends to get a more thorough answer than a stranger's quick question. Staff mentioned that these small conversations often become one of the more pleasant parts of a routine errand for customers and employees alike. Staff mentioned that most are genuinely happy to answer this kind of question, since it comes up often enough that they're used to it, and it takes only a moment during a normal shift. Staff mentioned that new employees are often surprised by how frequently this exact question comes up, quickly learning it's simply part of the regular rhythm of working the floor. This kind of relationship tends to build naturally simply from shopping the same store regularly, and staff mentioned genuinely appreciating when a customer takes the time to ask rather than assuming nobody would know or care. One longtime regular described this as the single most useful habit she'd picked up, since it saved her from missing a favorite discontinued item more than once. Bottom line, a friendly question costs nothing and occasionally saves you from missing out on a favorite item entirely, simply because staff often know before anyone else does. This kind of small personal connection matters more than people expect, turning a routine errand into something with a bit more warmth and reliability behind it. A quick, friendly conversation costs nothing and often ends up being the most valuable 5 minutes of the whole trip. Accurate number 6. Return policies are more flexible than most people assume. Even at these low price points, staff confirmed most items can be returned or exchanged within a reasonable window, particularly if something is defective. A lot of shoppers assume a dollar item isn't worth the hassle of a return and simply toss it, when a quick trip back to the store often resolves it without any cost. This applies even to something as small as a single defective toy or a broken household item, not just larger purchases where the return clearly feels worth the effort. Staff mentioned that the process is deliberately kept simple, precisely because the store doesn't want a small, low-cost item to become a source of ongoing customer frustration. Staff mentioned that keeping a receipt, even for a small purchase, makes the whole process faster and smoother, though many locations can still look up a purchase without one in a pinch. This matters especially for anyone on a limited budget, where even $1 or $2 adds up over repeated small losses that could otherwise be recovered through a simple return. One shopper mentioned being pleasantly surprised at how smoothly a return went for a cracked item, expecting far more hassle than what actually happened. Bottom line, not every disappointing dollar store purchase needs to be written off as a loss, and a quick return often resolves it without any real hassle involved. Staff mentioned that most returns, even without a receipt, can usually be handled with a simple exchange rather than requiring extensive paperwork. For anyone on a tight budget, recovering even $1 or $2 through a simple return adds up meaningfully over a year of occasional defective purchases. It's a habit worth building, even for the smallest purchases, simply because the process is so quick. Accurate number 7. Shopping the day after a holiday can mean deep discounts on the exact items you'll want again next year. Seasonal and holiday items get marked down significantly once the specific date passes, staff explained, and buying ahead for the following year at a steep discount is a well-known trick among regular shoppers who plan ahead. Staff mentioned that decorations, wrapping supplies, and themed party goods tend to see some of the steepest post-holiday markdowns of anything in the store, since none of it can be resold as full price once the specific occasion has passed. This pattern holds true across nearly every major holiday throughout the year, not just the biggest end-of-year season, meaning the same strategy works for smaller occasions too. Staff mentioned Valentine's Day, Easter, and back-to-school supplies all follow a similar post-occasion markdown pattern worth watching for. For anyone managing a fixed budget around the holidays specifically, this single habit can meaningfully reduce seasonal spending, stress months ahead of time, spreading the cost out rather than facing it all at once during the actual holiday season. One regular described this as her single biggest annual savings habit, building an entire holiday supply closet almost entirely from post-holiday clearance over several years. Bottom line, shifting holiday shopping to the day after the holiday itself, rather than the weeks leading up to it, can mean paying a fraction of the price for the exact same items. Staff mentioned that this habit works particularly well for anyone with the storage space to hold on to seasonal items for a full year. Even a small closet shelf dedicated to next year's holiday supplies can meaningfully reduce the financial pressure that builds up around the holidays each year. Spreading holiday costs out across the entire year rather than facing them all at once is a strategy worth adopting regardless of budget size. Accurate number 8. Bulk multi-packs aren't automatically the better deal. It's easy to assume a larger multi-pack always works out cheaper per item. But staff pointed out that isn't always true at Dollar Tree specifically, since some smaller single packs are priced disproportionately low compared to a bundled version. Doing quick per unit math before assuming bigger is better can occasionally save money rather than cost it. Staff mentioned this catches even careful shoppers off guard sometimes, Since the assumption that bulk automatically means savings is such a common habit built from shopping at bigger grocery chains, this matters most for anyone living alone or shopping for a smaller household where a large multi-pack may not actually get used before it goes stale or is simply more than needed. One shopper mentioned specifically switching to buying smaller quantities more often after realizing how much she'd been overpaying, assuming bulk was always cheaper. Bottom line, a quick per-unit calculation takes only seconds and occasionally flips the usual assumption that bigger automatically means better value. Staff mentioned this catches even experienced bargain shoppers off guard sometimes, since the instinct to assume bulk equals savings is so deeply ingrained. This matters most for anyone shopping for just one or two people, where a large multi-pack may go unused or expire before it's ever fully needed. A few extra seconds of math prevents both overspending and unnecessary waste from unused bulk purchases. Accurate number 9. Certain locations quietly offer a senior discount, even without an official company-wide policy. While Dollar Tree doesn't have a formal, universal senior discount program, several individual store managers have discretion to offer a small courtesy discount on select days, according to staff at more than one location. It never hurts to simply ask at the register whether a location offers anything, since the answer varies store by store. Staff mentioned that even when a discount exists locally, it's rarely advertised with signage, largely because it's an individual store's decision rather than a company-wide policy that can be consistently promoted. Staff mentioned that senior discount policies, where they exist locally, tend to be tied to a specific weekday rather than every day of the week, which is worth confirming directly rather than assuming. Even a small percentage off adds up meaningfully for anyone shopping on a fixed income, making regular trips throughout the month. One shopper mentioned being surprised to learn her regular store did offer a small discount on a specific weekday, something she only discovered after finally asking at the register. Bottom line, since this policy varies so widely by individual store, the only real way to find out is to ask directly, and there's genuinely nothing to lose by doing so. Staff mentioned that even in stores without a formal discount, employees are generally happy to check with a manager if asked directly and politely. Since this varies so much by individual store and even by manager, the only way to know for certain is to ask directly on your very next visit. It costs nothing to simply ask, and the worst outcome is a polite no, rather than any real downside. Secret number 10. Buying online for in-store pickup can occasionally reveal better stock or pricing than what's visible on the shelf. Checking a local store's online inventory before driving over, staff mentioned, sometimes reveals stock of a popular item that hasn't made it to the visible shelf display yet, letting you reserve it ahead of a trip rather than risk finding it sold out. Staff noted that backroom inventory occasionally shows up in the online system before it physically reaches the sales floor, meaning a specific item can technically be available even if it's not visible walking through the aisle. Staff noted that this is especially worth trying for popular seasonal items or anything trending, since those categories tend to sell through fastest and are most likely to still have stock sitting in the back. This is especially useful for anyone with limited mobility or transportation, where an unnecessary trip that turns up nothing is more than just an inconvenience. One shopper mentioned this, saving her a frustrating round trip more than once, particularly for a popular seasonal item that kept selling out before she arrived. Bottom line, a 2-minute check online before leaving the house can prevent a wasted trip entirely, which matters most for anyone for whom getting to the store isn't simple or quick. Staff mentioned this becoming increasingly useful as more locations improve how frequently their online inventory system updates throughout the day. For anyone who plans shopping trips carefully around limited time or transportation, this small extra step of checking online first can prevent a wasted outing entirely. A 2-minute check from home is a small price to pay for avoiding a disappointing, empty-handed trip. Accurate number 11. Managers have more flexibility on pricing than most shoppers realize. For a damaged package or a mismarked shelf tag, staff said managers often have the discretion to honor a lower price or offer a small additional discount on the spot, rather than requiring a customer to simply accept the sticker price as final. Staff mentioned that a shelf tag genuinely not matching the price at the register is more common than people expect, simply due to how frequently pricing gets updated across a large inventory. Staff mentioned that a brief lag between a newly printed shelf tag and the register system updating is common enough that most employees are used to correcting it on the spot without hesitation. This is worth remembering specifically because most shoppers simply accept whatever rings up at the register without checking it against the shelf tag at all. Staff mentioned this matters most on larger purchases with several items, where a single mismatch tag is easiest to overlook. One shopper mentioned catching a mismatch that saved her several dollars on a single trip, simply by mentioning it politely to the cashier. Bottom line, checking a receipt against the shelf price takes only a moment, and speaking up about a discrepancy is rarely met with resistance from staff who understand pricing errors happen. Staff mentioned that mismatch tags are usually an honest oversight rather than anything intentional, and correcting them is treated as routine. This is worth remembering specifically because most shoppers simply assume whatever rings up at the register must be correct without ever double checking it. A quick glance at a receipt before leaving the store takes only a moment and can catch an error before it's too late to fix easily. Accurate number 12. The best time of day to shop for fresh stock and shorter lines is usually mid-morning on a weekday. Staff consistently mention that stores tend to be quietest and best stocked in the late morning hours on a weekday, after the shelves have been restocked overnight, but before the after-work rush later in the day. Staff noted that weekend mornings tend to be the busiest and most picked-over time to shop, particularly right after a holiday or during a well-known sale period. Staff mentioned that the difference in crowd size between a busy Saturday morning and a quiet Tuesday late morning can feel like two entirely different stores. For anyone who finds crowded stores or long lines genuinely stressful, this small scheduling shift can make the entire shopping experience noticeably more pleasant, not just faster. One shopper mentioned switching her regular trip from Saturday morning to a Tuesday late morning, specifically after noticing how much calmer and better stocked the store felt. Bottom line, a small shift in timing, costing nothing extra, can make an entire shopping trip noticeably more pleasant from start to finish. Staff mentioned that this timing tip is one of the most commonly repeated pieces of advice they give to customers who ask about avoiding crowds. For anyone who finds a busy, crowded store genuinely stressful to navigate, this simple scheduling shift can turn a routine errand into a far calmer experience. It costs nothing extra and requires only a small adjustment to an existing routine. 12 details, none of them secret in the sense of being hidden or off limits, just quietly known by staff and easy for most shoppers to miss. Knowing even a few of these can genuinely change how much you spend and how satisfied you are with what you find on a regular trip. If this helped you shop a little smarter, passing it along to someone else who shops, Dollar Tree regularly costs nothing but a share. None of these secrets require spending more time or money, just a small shift in how you approach a trip you were already planning to take. Try even 3 or 4 of these on your very next trip, and there's a good chance at least one of them saves you something, whether that's money, time, or simply the frustration of an empty shelf where a favorite item used to be.